This is Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Welcome to Advanced TV Herstory. Here we are, autumn 2020, and you're about to hear conversations about TV role models. But before we begin, I want you to think about some of the unsung yet essential workers who have helped us through this turbulent year. Yep, I'm talking about the folks who have been helping consistently since lockdown, mental health providers. Now here in Chicago, we have clinics and practices all over town making a difference in the lives of individuals and families. One example is Arcus Behavioral Health and Wellness, a nonprofit clinic on Chicago's North Side that provides therapy, counseling, and psychological testing to LGBTQ, Latinx, young people, families, the whole works. While many clients have insurance, Arcus serves low-income families who may be unable to fully pay for their care. And Arcus doesn't send bill collectors to hunt down those with outstanding balances. Arcus Behavioral Health and Wellness is a 501c3 nonprofit community mental health agency. And unlike traditional mental health agencies that focus on problems like depression and anxiety, Arcus is equally invested in improving the quality of life and well-being of all their clients. You may have an Arcus in your town. Seek their services if you need them. And if you have a few bucks, make a tax-deductible donation to arcusbehavioralhealth.com. Learn more about their services there as well. This is not a paid advertisement, listeners. It's just doing right by professionals who every day are helping us get through this trying time. Folks, thanks for all you do in the mental health community, and thanks for listening to this podcast. Now, let's talk about role models. Welcome to this series of Advanced TV Herstory, celebrating role models, memorable characters, and what they meant for us, our aunties, mothers, and friendships, all of it. I'm so happy to be joined by Summer Martin of the Unconventional Woman podcast in this walk down memory lane. Summer brings an altogether different experience and perspective to this chat, different from the one you're used to from here at Advanced TV Herstory. Her current home is in Dallas, Texas, by way of LA. She's a dozen years to my junior, and she's a proud Black woman who shares her perspective. I've come to know Summer through a community of women podcasters led by Podcast Hall of Famer Elsie Escobar. Summer, Elsie, and so many others have contributed to my growth as a podcaster, advocate, and ally. Thanks, ladies. And now we're looking at the independent self, the one who kind of marches to the beat of a different drum, a trailblazer of sorts. And we've got some good ones. Summer and I had fun talking these through. And what it came to be is not just that these were women who resonated with us, but again, fall into this category of representation because they were different. They appealed, I think, to women who necessarily hadn't totally seen themselves or hadn't recently seen themselves on TV. And we can start off with Jody Landon from Daria. Daria, of course, still playing on MTV.com. If you haven't watched Daria or haven't seen it in a while, go back. It is as relevant and fresh today.
Yes.
As it was in 1997 to 2001. Jody Landon, tell us, Summer.
Pro tip, it is actually being played on Hulu as well. Cynthia and I were talking about this project just a couple of days ago. And Cynthia, you don't know this, but status update, I am successfully on season 2, episode 2. Daria, wow. Just, you get all the warm and fuzzies, like I believe Laura was saying with Aunt Becky, you know, the nostalgia. Daria was just ahead of its time, and it is aged like a fine bottle of wine. So if you were curious back then and didn't get into it, I recommend it. Or if you were a fan of it when you were younger, rewatch it, please. I am actually on the path of getting to know Jody. So she's around, but I don't really remember. I believe she was Quinn's friend. I'm still waiting on confirmation as I get more and more through the series. I admit I was fixated on Daria a little bit not in a strange way, but just Daria was very much impressionable for me. So I'm looking forward to recalling Jody's progression through the series and what her characteristic traits are. I'm excited that Tracy Ellis Ross is taking on this project to do a spinoff for Jody. And another thing I appreciate in preparation for this conversation, I was just Google searching and looking at the voice voices of these characters. And I appreciate, and it's the little things that they used a Black actor for Jody, and they did for the other characters as well. It was just appropriate. And it's a little thing that may not matter to many. Again, it's animation, but even back then, they were, I'm going to say, cautious about the voices.
I think they were cautious about a lot of things. And
Yes.
Listeners, so if you aren't familiar with Daria much, and specifically the role of Jody, which grew a little bit, I would say, you're right, from season 2 and further. Jody and her boyfriend were the token.
Right.
The students of color, not just in the circle, not just in Daria's group, and Daria being fairly bright, kind of ran with the accelerated crowd, which was not necessarily popular. Jody was popular. Her parents were professionals. They were educated. They were expecting her to go to college. You got the sense that she had the weight of the world on her shoulders, that she needed to stay within the box. And Daria and Jane Lane were always with one foot outside the box, doing everything they could to celebrate that liberation.
Yes.
And I am hopeful that that's exactly what Tracy Ellis Ross recognized is important to be told as a story, that those expectations and what they meant, the expectations from the white people, from the Black people in these scenarios.
And I trust Tracy is definitely going to carry that baton very well into the spinoff. I think that's a perfect pairing for someone on that project. Yeah.
And done in animation, you get to suspend your belief about reality in order to capture the lesson.
Yes, it can go there.
Yes, it can. We are looking forward to that. And I am thrilled that you've reconnected with your inner Daria. You know, they are all three, as young women characters go, really strong. They are role models. The idea that there is that much sarcasm rolling around in 16-year-olds should surprise nobody.
Right.
And when you find it also in your 55-year-old self or whatever, then it's sort of like, yeah, you know what? I feel young all over again.
You do. And I also think, again, going back to why it aged so well, not only, you know, as my 40-year-old self, appreciating the storytelling, but also, you know, high schoolers today would get a lot from listening and learning from a character like Daria and Jane and Jody, and even Quinn for that matter, bless her heart. Relevant high school conversation even today. Yeah.
Universal. Yes. Kind of like My So-Called Life in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Daria. All right. On Hulu and MTV right now.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to spend a moment on the notion of the women who were in A Different World, which was a Cosby production that aired from 1987 to 1993. And it was originally intended to be a spinoff of Denise Huxtable moving on to college and to a historic Black college.
Mm-hmm.
And that first year was Annie Bates as the producer and the director, and it was kind of a disaster. And Debbie Allen took it over in season 2. I've done an entire episode on that, interviewing Dr. Robin Means Coleman, who has written extensively about the role that Debbie Allen played in creating A Different World to be the extraordinary, somewhat timeless sitcom that it has become today. Embedded in all of that fresh series of characters, since by then Denise Huxtable, played by
Lisa Bonet.
Thank you. Left for all sorts of reasons. Freddie Brooks became the character who was a standout. So crowdsourcing, I found Maryam Muhammad, who had written a Medium blog and had talked about characters who were very influential to her.
So I'm only 19 years old, but I watched a lot of 80s and 90s television growing up because of my parents. And one show that I absolutely loved was a show called A Different World. And if you haven't heard of A Different World, it's a spinoff of The Cosby Show. And on that show, there was one character that really resonated with me, and I still feel her spirit to this day, and her name was Freddie. And Freddie was an activist, and she was an environmentalist, and she was a feminist, and she was all around woke before woke was really a thing in the 1980s. She was always on this wave of like, we have to save the rainforest, or we have to free a political prisoner, or we have to talk about apartheid and Nelson Mandela. She really had the spirit of activism, but also she wasn't serious. Freddie was very quirky and bubbly. She was lighthearted and free-spirited. And her character really spoke to me because I was always someone who cared about very serious issues, but I was never very serious and as militant as I could be. I was usually someone who would talk about certain issues, but I would also laugh and joke with my friends. And one thing about Freddie was not everyone understood her, and that really spoke to me too, because not everyone understood me growing up. And people would try to dismiss whatever thing she was talking about, like, oh, this is weird, you're being annoying. But in reality, she really led like a movement in her own right. She was really an activist, and this is something she didn't want credit for. The credit that she wanted was just the credit that change was being made. And one thing I love about her was, like, throughout the show, you could really see how she grows as an activist. She learns how to use her voice. She learns how to hold events. She learns how to put people on game to things that are still relevant to this day. And it's not even just Freddie Brooks. Like, the actress that plays her, Cree, she is just the same in real life. She's always talking about making the world a better place. She's always talking about spirituality. I see on social media she has 2 very young daughters, and she's trying to teach them how to be spiritual and very influential human beings. And she's always talking about things that are important. She's talking about racism. She's talking about sexism. She's talking about apartheid, war. I think that she really inspired me to, like, stand in my foundation of who I am as a Black woman, especially a young Black woman who's in college now. Even though people may try to shut you down or tell you the things that you're into don't matter, Freddie taught me that they do. They really do. And I just think overall she's a beautiful character. And Cree, the actress who plays her, you can tell she's not acting. You can tell when she talks about war or famine or anything, this is something she actually cares about. So she was, like, perfect for the role. And to this day, I just think Freddie has had a huge influence on my life. I hope to meet Cree one day, because that's what I'm going to tell her. And I just think she's a great role model for not just young Black women, but for people in general, because she teaches honesty and genuineness and how to stand in your truth. And that's something I think that everyone should value in their lives.
Yes, Different World is another one of those shows that was extremely influential. In fact, it is the reason why I chose the undergrad college that I did. I wanted to go to a Black school because of this show, and also other influences, but this definitely gave me a sneak peek of what it would be like. And because of that, the representation, it helped really guide me towards wanting to seek that type of, like, experience.
And that role of Freddie Brooks is the idealist, the one who is driven by passion and justice.
Very much.
For justice. Whereas the Kim character who's studying medicine, she is handling some of that Jody Land and carrying the weight of the expectations of her family. And then you have Whitley Gilbert, who is just thrown.
It was, oh my God, the character dynamics are out of this world.
Yep.
If you're not familiar, I highly recommend that as well.
All the characters on A Different World evolved over time. 4 years in college morphed into post-college years and life as a young professional. Freddie was no different. Hillman College still remained a gathering place for the graduates in Season 6 when a more serious Freddie, who later springs Diane Carroll and Patti LaBelle from jail, shows up.
That's pretty harsh there, pal. I say it had nothing to do with the prosecution. The minute they moved the trial, it was over.
The point is, nothing ever changes. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
I take that back.
Freddie?
So what's going on?
What in the hell happened to you?
Freddie's going to law school. No. Congratulations, Winifred. Thank you, my sister. And you look fabulous. Wait a minute, hold it, hold it. Hold it. They're worth it. Thank you. What is up with this Robin Gibbons look? They're just clothes. Are you serious? Yes, I am, and I plan to be taken seriously. Freddie, you're buying into the system. And you used to be about something.
I am about something. I am about studying this system, understanding it so I can change it. I'm your secret weapon, little sister. So if and when you finally decide to walk some of this talk and march, then I will be the one making sure you don't get arrested. Oh, militant one.
Goodbye, Tracy Chapman. Hello, Barbara Jordan.
So, listeners, if you have an opportunity to roll around and want to read more about some of these influential role models, Maryam Muhammad is a blogger on Medium, and her article is actually entitled 5 Black Female TV Characters Who Inspire Me. Nice. And find it on Medium. Thank you so much, Maryam, for putting that out there and making it findable for someone like me producing a podcast like this. Another really memorable, independent trailblazer kind of person, which we both had different memories of, was Jessica Fletcher, played by Angela Lansbury in Murder, She Wrote. That long-running 1984 to 1996 series. Yes. And Lansbury did not actually win an Emmy. She was nominated twice. She did clean up at the Golden Globes for that role of Jessica Fletcher, who kind of had the perfect life as a 60-something. And I think 60-somethings really saw themselves in her.
Sure. And we don't have enough of that today. We need to fulfill that void some more.
We do. My kids remember my mother watching reruns of Murder, She Wrote while they went to her house after school and sat and had their snack and everything. She'd pick them up from school or they'd walk to her house, and Murder, She Wrote was always on. And I do believe my mother saw herself in Angela Lansbury, that perfect life of being a writer, somebody who is valued for her contributions. She had agency. She didn't rely on a man. She had her own income. She was respected in the community.
Nice.
We don't put that out there enough for women. We do for men.
This show was definitely in rotation for my mother. I do recall also my grandmother watching it when I would spend summers with her in Virginia. It definitely brings memories, and I'm not familiar with the show from my own perspective. I just occasionally recall my mother and grandmother in deep thought and concentration as they enjoyed watching this awesome woman solve crimes.
Because all that crime has to happen in a little tiny town called Cabot Cove in Maine. The other thing that it's a little bit of a shout back or a harken back to some of those big series that would take on some of the sort of aging stars of Hollywood, and they'd come in as these guest roles or recurring roles or sometimes just one-offs. And that was in part so that they could have the number of acting hours, in a sense, under their belt, the credit for each year so that they could qualify for union-generated health insurance.
Wow.
We would be remiss if we didn't talk about role models and say Mary Richards from The Mary Tyler Moore Show, which aired 1970 to 1976. It broke so many different records and barriers. Summer, have you watched any?
I have not seen one.
Right.
I have a long list after our conversation.
You do.
I'm so fascinated with all of it.
So the good news is that I did 3 episodes of this podcast early on, carving up a great fun interview with Jennifer Keishin Armstrong, who wrote a book, which was an oral history of the development of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Among the reasons why Mary has become such a memorable character as a single woman, having a job and not doing so in pursuit of a man or even marriage. She, in fact, resists a number of suitors over the years, is that it was written by women. And it was written for that very feminist emerging time of 1970. We can look back on Julia, played by Diane Carroll, as a single mom and as a nurse. We can look back on That Girl, played by Marlo Thomas, and there was some overlap of That Girl and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. But Mary was all about her career and having a couple friends and making it on her own. No need to talk too much more about that, but it is a repeat favorite when you ask somebody the question, who is your role model, that there is an aspect of the baby boom that pretty much immediately says Mary Richards.
Very nice.
Yeah. And the growth of the Mary Tyler Moore Show and the spin-offs that emerged from it was a testament to Mary Tyler Moore being a force, a very positive force. She surrounded herself by really quality people, and they were intent to just continue succeeding, recognizing what it was that America wanted and needed to watch. And Norman Lear did the same thing. The last character from this sort of independent streak category is Sister Bertille, who was the Flying Nun, played by Sally Field. And that was a series that ran 1967 to 1970. I find this to be a stretch, but I'm going to put it out there because my friend Paula from high school added it to the list. Did you do some more research on the Flying Nun?
I did not. I got sucked into the Daria tunnel. I'm not even going to lie.
I don't blame you a bit. What I will say is that I pressed Paula and I said, why Sister Bertille? From this series that isn't really taken seriously, and some would question whether or not it was even taken seriously when it was on. And that's where, I think the fact that your age of what it is that you're watching, or maybe watching it as a rerun, has a bearing on whether you consider it a role model, because what Paula saw in there was not being a very happy Catholic girl and seeing Sister Bertille kind of not being fully respectful of Mother Superior and all of the senior nuns. And maybe it was just that early sign that the baby boom was going to continue to reframe society to some degree, expect more from religion, and if they didn't expect more, to walk away from it. Otherwise, it's a rather odd series, but I kind of felt compelled to put that in there because there aren't too many role models that also have a religious side to them.
Fair. I agree.
And I think we as women continue to wrestle with that. I think about the Mary McDonnell character of Sharon Rader from Major Crimes and The Closer. And she ultimately did bring a rich layer of being Catholic to that role. And I think that was can be attributed to Mary and the strength and the importance that she feels religion plays in the role of a professional woman. Now, we do have this other character that we were talking about. Jamie Summers is the Bionic Woman. Oh, to me, that show comes on and I just have to stop. My jaw drops. That's what I will say is for all three of these characters, and they are more my characters, I think, than they are yours. I just stopped because it was science. It was government-based science at its best, and who can't appreciate that right now? So Jamie Summers was originally a tennis player before she had her skydiving accident. Wow. And, she was always out to get the bad guy, and she didn't have to have a gun to do it.
How about that?
Yeah, I think she could be a role model for lots of people these days. I also have to say that I believe in 1963 to 1966, and maybe there are some older listeners out there who would back me up on this, but Patty Duke, Patty Duke, who portrayed the identical cousins, Patty and Kathy, on the Patty Duke Show, that there was a teenage girl on TV who had a certain amount of agency and could be herself and then somebody else, actually. And there weren't too many of those on TV at the time. And when that show comes on, I just have to stop. She was a force.
I love that.
I've done now 3 episodes on Patty Duke and her life. Not so much the Patty Duke Show, but rather the role that she plays in TV Herstory, starting with this because she did have such a prolific career. And it didn't go the way that we all maybe would have expected it to. But the 60s, 70s, and 80s, she nonetheless appears in many things. And she was a phenomenal actor, sorely missed. Yeah. And then we have Claire Danes as Carrie Matheson from Showtime's Homeland. And have you seen any seasons of Homeland?
I have not. It has been a to-do item for a couple of years, and I haven't gotten around to it yet.
It's a thriller. Right. It is fast-paced. It has run 2011 to 2020.
It's had a good run.
Yeah, and Carrie Matheson, Claire Danes, has been such a phenomenal lead character in every episode, really dominating it for strength. I have a hard time finding role model kinds of qualities in here, but I felt like we needed to give it a shout out.
I've been thinking some more about Carrie Matheson as a role model versus a memorable character, and I kind of feel like the jury is out because there are still so many millions of women who need to watch this series. The fact that Homeland has been a highly acclaimed series yet available only initially through Showtime has really limited its viewing audience. It's sort of like Sex and the City's original run on HBO. If you didn't subscribe to HBO, you kind of knew what the series was about, but you hadn't had the experience. I'll say, in fact, that I watched most of Homeland on DVDs checked out from the library a couple of years ago. But Claire Danes, as a performer, has grown up before our eyes since that short-lived series, My So-Called Life. This role as Carrie Matheson has shown her full array of acting chops, and something tells me that in another 20 years we will look back on this series as seminal work. This is a Showtime-produced clip where Claire talks about the character and her affinity for Carrie.
My first impression of Carrie was, that's a lot. That's going to be a lot. I was intimidated by her darkness and her condition, really. When you're considering a pilot, you have to imagine that you'll be working on the project for at least 7 years. It's a big choice to make, and I was nervous, but I was also excited by her. I loved her intelligence and her strength and her power. She's just so in my nervous system and in my muscles. It became very intuitive. In 6 months, I would have been returning to her, and that's not gonna happen. And I think, that will maybe dawn on me then, just the kind of conclusive-ness of it. She'll always be there. I can always grab her if I need her, I think, for all of her difficulty and her demandingness. I grew to really love her.
I am so grateful to Summer Martin of the Unconventional Woman podcast for her strong feelings and preparation. Whoa, someday, Summer, we will kick back on the couch and enjoy some serious TV watching. Learn more about her podcast at www.tuwpodcast.com. Follow Summer on Twitter at SummerGory, SUMMERGORY, or on Instagram at unconventional_woman. Shout out as well to Maryam Muhammad, a student at Temple University, and a blogger at Medium, a place where writers, influencers, and podcasters get the word out. Find her work at MaryamAziza.com. The links are in the show notes. On Instagram, she's known as Neptune's Negress, and on Twitter, Oily Eyelids. A bit more about Maryam. At the moment, she's also working on a first poetry book entitled Bantu Knots and Butterflies, which is about growing up and evolving from a little girl to a young adult woman. She is self-publishing it and plans to have it out by the end of the year or the beginning of next year. Clips contained in this episode are from A Different World, Season 6, Episode 1, and Claire Danes on becoming Carrie Matheson on Homeland on Showtime's YouTube channel. All this audio is brewed and prepared by Catherine Yang, our talented sound designer and social content developer. Our theme music is Jazzer's Take Me Higher, found on Free Music Archive. Now, I've mentioned a gazillion episodes of this podcast in the conversation with Summer, talking about really fun episodes I've produced in the past. And all those links can be found in the show notes. Gosh, the ones with Jennifer Keishin Armstrong, who is an author of Sex and the City and Us and a book about the Mary Tyler Moore Show. A great chat I had with Dr. Robin Means Coleman talking about Debbie Allen's Transformation of a Different World, and a few others. Good stuff. Stay up to date on the podcast's work behind the microphone by heading to tvherstory.com and signing up for our monthly e-newsletter. Rest assured, we're not selling you anything, just sharing more good thoughts about TV women, role models, series old and new, what I'm watching, and background work that goes into creating this podcast. Most importantly, thank you for listening to this episode of Advanced TV Herstory. I think it might be a good one to refer to someone who's perhaps new to podcasts or is looking to hear her own thoughts and life echoed in a podcast. In these trying times, we're learning just how important it is to see ourselves on TV. That's why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.